It's Saudi Arabia's oil giant, Aramco, has finally been given the green light to go public, a part of the Crown Prince's plans to overhaul the Saudi economy. But can Aramco's IPO satisfy his ambitions? And what, if any, are the risks? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Dareen Ghaida. Saudi Arabia's crown jewel and the world's largest oil-producing firm, Aramco, is now set to go public after several delays. The initial public offering, or IPO, will be on the Saudi Stock Exchange. How much of the company's for sale and at what price will be determined later. Well, part of the Crown Prince's economic plans for the kingdom, the flotation aims to raise billions of dollars. But estimates of how much it might actually draw vary widely. Mohammed Bin Salman wants a $2 trillion price tag. Many bankers put it at $1.5 trillion. And critics of the IPO say investing in Aramco could be risky. The company suffered a drone and missile attack in September that temporarily shut down half its production. Osama bin Javed reports.
The world's most anticipated stock offering is happening after years of hype and several delays. Saudi Aramco, the world's largest oil-producing firm, is being listed on Riyadh's Tadawul exchange, and shares are expected to be priced in December. It's no ordinary oil company. Aramco is the engine driving Saudi Arabia's economy.
This day is truly historic. We are happy to announce our intention to list the Saudi Aramco company at the Saudi Stock Exchange market.
The IPO is the centerpiece of Crown Prince Mohammed Bin Salman's Vision 2030, and the stock offering is meant to bring in enough revenue to diversify the kingdom's economy. Plans to list on the world's leading exchanges had to be scrapped because of transparency requirements. But there's still talk of an international offering after the internal listing in Saudi Arabia. The ambitious Crown Prince set out a $2 trillion price tag. To put that into context, the world's most valuable companies such as Microsoft and Apple stand at half of what the prince wanted. Mohammed bin Salman appears to have swallowed a lower valuation instead of further delaying the IPO. Analysts believe probable and proven oil reserves can vary tremendously, and for a listing outside of the kingdom, Aramco would have to prove its reserves. For foreign investors, the biggest concern is about the safety of their investment. An attack by Yemen's Houthi rebels in September reduced the company's oil production by half. Investors are cautious of Saudi Arabia's neighborhood, with ISIL pockets in the Iraqi desert in the north and Iran-allied Houthi rebels in the south, a self-inflicted crisis with Qatar in the east and brewing tension with Iran in the Strait of Hormuz.
No one expected that Houthis or any other non-state actors could be so successful in disrupting the oil production. That also had its impact on the lower evaluation.
Investors also have to consider the opaque two-year anti-corruption drive, which has widely been seen as a shakedown of wealthy Saudis, and also journalist Jamal Khashoggi's gruesome killing, which was linked directly to the Crown Prince. Saudi Arabia has tried to lure investors from Asia to Europe and from Russia to the United States. Saudi Arabia is reportedly still holding government-to-government meetings to attract investment from sovereign wealth funds. Industry experts believe much of the investment from the Riyadh listing will come from wealthy Saudi families, not foreign investors. It's curious timing for such an IPO with a weak outlook for oil prices, a sluggish global economy, and increased environmental awareness against the use of fossil fuels. Osama bin Javed, Al Jazeera.
So Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman announced Saudi Arabia's 2030 economic vision more than 3 years ago. That plan aims to expand the private sector and diversify the kingdom's economy away from oil. This would include investment in renewable energy and large-scale real estate projects like the planned futuristic city Neom, which would cost around $500 billion. It also seeks to increase tourism from 3% of gross domestic product to 10% and boost culture and entertainment, as well as decrease unemployment from more than 11% to 7%, as well as get more women into the workforce. For more on this, I'm joined by our guests. Here in Doha with us is Mohammed Cherkaoui. He's an author and senior fellow at the Jazeera Centre for Studies. Joining us via Skype from Beirut, Joseph Keshishian, also an author and senior fellow at the King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies. Also on Skype from Rhode Island, Colgan. He's an associate professor at Brown University and the author of Petro-Aggression, When Oil Causes War. Welcome to you all. Joseph Keshishian, I'll start with you in Beirut. So it's no secret that the proceeds from the IPO will be used by the kingdom's sovereign public investment fund to be re-injected into the Saudi economy as part of Mohammed Bin Salman's Vision 2030. So would you say that there's a lot at stake for Mohammed Bin Salman personally with this IPO, since Vision 2030 is really his baby?
It is, but it will also help a great deal the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that has to address the challenges that it faces. And there is no denying the fact that you have a workforce of 14 million people, of whom only 4 million are natives, which means that with over 50% of the population being less than 25 years old, the economy has to create a lot more jobs in the future. So this IPO will helpfully add to the economic engine of the kingdom, and it will allow for the country to reinvest some of its resources precisely to create the kind of jobs on which Vision 2030 is based. If this succeeds, it will not only be good for Mohammed bin Salman and the government in general, but much more importantly, it will be excellent for Saudi society at large and the rest of the region for that matter.
Yeah, we'll talk about the economic challenges in a moment. Mohammed Cherkaoui, the Saudi Arabian energy minister, recently said that the Saudi listing would be a Saudi decision, first of all, and specifically Mohammed bin Salman's decision. So what does this tell you about the personal stake Mohammed bin Salman has in this?
Well, there is a huge difference between the announcement and the potential. And I think between August 2018 and November 2019, this deal, IPO of Aramco, has lost a lot of money, a lot of valuation. Now the Saudis have to accept about 500 billion loss between the 2 trillion that was expected a year and a half ago and the 1.5 trillion. Plus, I disagree with the gentleman here. I mean, we may have this potential of investment of these revenues within the infrastructure, but there is no guarantee that this is going to trickle down to the ordinary Saudis who are lacking a lot of services, and the infrastructure is not really what it's supposed to be. So I would look at it as a declining business deal with a political momentum for MBS. He needs this offer now to tell the world that I am in charge, and those drones that have attacked Aramco installations back on September 14 don't affect the process. Therefore, we are now in business and we are invited. Not only that, the Saudis are giving some kind of excitement to the market by adding another $80 billion to the investors who are willing to come, and they are giving them assurance that they will get at least the minimum of 4.4% between now and 2024.
Jeff Colgan, at the time of the IPO, the idea of the IPO was floated or announced in 2016. You said that Saudi Arabia is interested in selling shares to raise revenue while oil prices are low, and that the country is running a huge fiscal deficit, and that's one way to plug that hole. Does that argument still stand today?
Well, I think the striking thing that we're seeing here with the world's most profitable company is that so few international investors are interested in buying it. So that creates a problem for plugging that deficit and raising the revenues that Crown Prince Mohammed had hoped to do so. And I think the previous comment is exactly right, that we're seeing a lower valuation in part because of the kind of political circumstances around Aramco, the attack on the Abqaiq facility, and of course the questions around the rule of law. But there's also some real questions here about climate change. And Norway's sovereign wealth fund, the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, has said, no, we're not interested in buying any shares of Aramco. And in part, that's because investors around the world are thinking, long term, we have to be worried about stranded assets in fossil fuels. And that's a real concern for not just Norway, but for other investors around the world.
And Joseph, On that point that Jeff was just raising, the concerns regarding fossil fuel, not only that, the kingdom itself has said that it wants to sort of move away from its dependence on oil, and that, in fact, is part of the Vision 2030 plan, excuse me. So is there a contradiction here to be made that they're launching this IPO, yet at the same time that invests in hydrocarbon, at the same time it wants to move away from oil dependency?
No, there is no contradiction. Obviously, you can see whether the glass is half full or half empty. One can make any decision that they want. This IPO will raise a great deal of money, perhaps $50 billion. And trust me, there will be a lot more buyers than those who are standing by right now, like the Norwegian and others who are saying this is not going to work. There are serious climate change issues, no denying about the fact that fossil fuels add to the pollution in which we live. And Aramco has been accused since 1965 of producing about 5% of all the pollution on the planet, which means that everybody else has produced 95%, and nobody talks about the 95%. So let's cut the chase here. There is a fundamental issue. Oil is a commodity that is very much in need, and not just Saudi Arabia, but all of the Gulf countries are in it thick and thin, including Iran, incidentally. So therefore, one should stop throwing stones at the glass because one is inside the glass house.
Let's talk
now, whether or not the IPO...
Yeah, go ahead. Please go ahead, Joseph.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, what I was going to say, the IPO is intended for specific purposes. It is to raise funds, and only approximately 5% of Aramco shares will be put on the stock market, which means that there will be a lot more reserves. And let's not forget that Saudi Arabia sits on 230 billion barrels of petroleum. Now, there will be a day when petroleum will no longer be used around the world and when fossil fuels will no longer be used. But we're not there yet. And it is an illusion to believe that this one company that is trying to address internal problems can just be dismissed as being a failure because the initial evaluation of 2 trillion is down to 1.5 trillion now. I think these are semantics. At the end of the day, finances is all about trust, and we will see whether or not the international investors and local and regional investors will perceive Aramco to be a worthwhile a company to purchase. Let me remind you that not only Saudis and residents in Saudi Arabia can actually purchase stocks, but every single GCC citizen will be allowed to purchase Aramco stock. That's not too shabby as far as I'm concerned.
Mohammed Cherkaoui, Joseph was correctly saying that the role of this IPO is to invest money and it's into the sovereign wealth fund as we understand it to be. What do you think the role of the sovereign wealth fund is in the country?
Well, first, let me say that international investment is about perception, is about confidence in whatever asset you are trying to sell to the world. So it's not only about trust. So now, with the more these international investors are asking questions, the more flexibility the Saudis are showing in terms of putting a lot of sugar on the cake, ice sugar in, if you like. So let me go back to your question. There has been a major problem from the onset of the Vision 2030. It is a huge vision. It has a lot of potential there. However, Saudis and other people who are interested in this part of the world are still asking questions. What are the specifics? What is the real strategy of such a plan to be implemented? So in other words, we have the big title, but we don't have the details that are helping these investors to come.
Well, we do have some of the details. When we talk about unemployment, for example, one of the plans
from
for the
11
Vision
to 7, but how to go there?
Right, so creating 450,000 non-governmental jobs and reducing unemployment. In fact, by next year is the target.
Yeah, but if this depends only on cash, on the cash that Aramco would generate, I think this beats the point. I mean, in the last 2 years, we have seen some revenues come into the Saudi budget. Some of the wealthy businessmen in Saudi were put in Ritz-Carlton, and then there was more than $100 billion already available. The question is, where are all these money Do we have an idea where this shifting the money from one side to the other? What I'm trying to say is, yes, announcements are made, but they are not enough. And I think this plan 2030 has not been sold well to the international market, including the Aramco 5%.
Jeff Colgan, as I was just saying, one of the aims of the sovereign wealth fund in Saudi Arabia is to invest money in sectors that will then in turn create jobs for Saudi nationals specifically. Yet the economy still hasn't seen really payoffs from this plan. Unemployment is quite high in Saudi Arabia at 12.7%. So is it still too early to see the fruits of this Vision 2030, or is the Crown Prince simply not on track with this?
Well, to be fair to the Crown Prince, the struggle to diversify an economy that's traditionally been linked heavily to oil towards a broader mixed economy, this is something that many countries around the world have tried and really struggled with. This is something that is very hard to do. And to some extent, I would say he is correct to think long term about the transition that his country needs to go through. But the fact is that the numbers aren't bearing out yet. And the kind of change that needs to happen in Saudi Arabia, I think, is not only economic, but probably also to a certain degree cultural, in the sense of creating a higher work ethic. And that takes time. That's something that doesn't develop overnight. And the challenges that he faces are certainly broader than the Aramco IPO itself. But as one of the centerpieces of the strategy, right now it's not producing the kind of effect and confidence building that he no doubt would have liked to see. And in part, that's because of his own mistakes, his own missteps around producing the kind of confidence that investors, both domestic and international, look for in terms of rule of law and predictability in a business climate.
Joseph Kashashian, let's pick up on that point. And in fact, you raised this at the beginning of the program, the issue of the challenges facing the country. So the timing of this announcement really is quite interesting, a lot of people say. Just in September, as you know, we saw that attack on Aramco facilities. So to what extent does political risk to what extent is political risk there, and will that then affect investor sentiment domestically and internationally?
No, it will not. On the contrary, I think that the risks are there, of course, like in any other business. And the attacks that occurred when the Iranians attacked the facilities through their Houthi friends and allies, if you would like, within a matter of 1 month, the repairs were made and the production is now back to what it was. The Saudis lost $25 million in the process because all that oil went in smoke. But as somebody who works in Saudi Arabia, who travels there all the time, I am much more optimistic than most other people. I see the dynamic changes that are taking place. The challenges are there. Saudi Arabia does need to create a lot of jobs. The work ethic is changing. I can see it. I've been going to Saudi Arabia since 1983 on a regular basis, and I spent half of my life there, and I see a lot of changes going on. But that doesn't mean that everything has been fixed. It doesn't mean that the real estate, the housing issues have been resolved. That doesn't mean that the demographic situation has improved. But there are positive signs. During the first quarter of 2019, of this year, the Saudi government the budget has a $10 billion surplus, as opposed to a year ago. So therefore, there are lots of changes. Vision 2030 is very ambitious, and it will take a generation for it to be put in place. It is silly to assume that it will be done in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. One has to be very patient, and the onus is on the leadership of Saudi Arabia to assume the responsibilities and help create wealth. The IPO of Aramco is just one arm of this tremendous transformation that the Saudi economy is undergoing right now. There are lots of other projects to create all kinds of facilities for tourism, for playgrounds, etc., etc. And time will tell whether or not all of this will be successful. One can be very pessimistic, of course, and say, no, the Saudis cannot do anything right. They are guilty. One can say, let's wait and see whether or not the work ethic is changing, the economy is improving, investments are coming. And it is true, as Mohammed said a moment ago, that perception is very important. But I would add to it that perception goes along with trust and confidence building.
Right.
And on that
and
score,
on the note, on
the
the issue of perception, Jeff, when you look at the sort of the international community and the way that it's perceived, the kingdom, specifically in the wake of the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. So some would say that the kingdom actually faces a tarnished image abroad.
I think the killing of Jamal Khashoggi is not something that just disappears. You know, that it's something that lingers and that it changes people's perceptions over a long period of time. And so to try to change perceptions back to something around Saudi Arabia being a reliable country that respects the rule of law, there needs to be a track record there of performance by the Crown Prince Mohammed.
Mohammed Cherkaoui, go ahead.
I would say this is ironic. It's a combination of two things that don't get together. You have a valuable financial asset with a political liability. And I believe that this momentum of Aramco has been missed 2 years ago. Could have been much better time to put it in the market and get whatever money was supposed to be coming. I think that it may not even reach $1 trillion between now and December, when foreign investors will decide whether to go along or to be careful.
As we're saying, the estimate is between 1.2 to 1.5 according
or even
to banks.
less.
Yeah.
Plus, I also see that besides the lack of confidence because of the negative perception of the Saudi market now, there is also the overspending or the high expectations. Now the Saudis are promising foreign investors that they would get a certain ratio or a certain dividend, and it will cost them more. So I look at this nest that is losing more eggs between now and December and beyond, next year and so forth. So Vision 2030 may be very promising in many ways in terms of bringing some jobs and better services and better infrastructure. But my concern is this gap between what we plan and what we can execute or not. And I think this is a struggle here. And the McKinsey consultants are good at creating this image, this Wonderland 2020 Saudi Arabia. But my question is how pragmatic Saudis can be with this IPO and with other plans that are associated with the whole vision of 2030. So we should not be too optimistic. We should not be also too missing the point, and sometimes details make it or break it.
30 seconds to Joseph Khashoggi and Jeff Colgan, because I saw you both nodding ahead. Joseph, you first.
No, I mean, I think that Mohammed is right. We should not be too optimistic. But on the other hand, Mohammed, you have to be honest with yourself. We should not be pessimistic either. I mean, life is too short to be so unhappy.
I'm pragmatic.
That's how it's doing.
And Jeff Colgan, pessimism or optimism, where do you stand?
I think that's exactly right. The gap between the projections and the reality of implementation is real. And so Mohammed's right to focus on, let's make sure that, the results are as good as can be delivered.
All right. On that note, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks to all my guests, Mohammed Cherkaoui here in Doha, Jeff Colgan over in the US, and Joseph Khashoggi for speaking to us from Beirut. Thank you. Thank you for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, you can go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From myself and the whole team here in Doha, thanks for watching. Bye-bye for now.